Chandra Rao, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Will, thank you for having me.
Chandra, you and your business partner are building a Holdco, not at least initially with some grand strategy. In your case, one acquisition led to another. But here you sit, multiple acquisitions later, with what is essentially a Holdco. So before we get into your background, Chandra, let's just give people a picture of what the Holdco looks like today. So current, and then we'll work. We'll go all the way back to the beginning and work forwards.
Yeah. So today within our organization, we describe them as divisions. So we have three main divisions: our electric construction company, or electric construction division. Then we have underground construction, which does construction of fiber networks, and then we have fiber splicing, which is very synergistic to that business, and it just splices fiber together once it's in the ground. So basically passing light through, making sure the data can pass, things along those lines. So a little bit more of a technical skill set.
Okay.
So we've got those three divisions. They're made up of multiple acquisitions.
How many acquisitions to date?
So we have done, so what is in that Holdco is 4 total acquisitions. We've done 5. 5 in that Holdco. We've done 6. We spun 1 business off.
And can you give us a picture of revenue and projected EBITDA for the year?
Yeah, so we should hit on the low end $12 million, somewhere around the $3 million of EBITDA.
Okay. Now let's rewind. Start us wherever you think is relevant to how this adventure started unfolding.
Yeah. So, I'll start back. I went to B school. I graduated in 2012. Before I knew what ETA was, I actually didn't know this space at all. Went to go work for a big tech company, worked for Oracle. And then a friend of mine was building a small SaaS business. He was my fraternity brother. I thought, well, I don't think I'll get any return on this investment, but he's asked me for some investment to get his thing off the ground. We'll just go. Comes to, about a year in, he can't live off these dollars. He's asked for a buyout, and his buyout is pretty nominal. It was just, the amount of credit card debt that he had. So I said, all right, well, there's enough cash flow from this business. I'll just do some 0% APR credit card transfers. I'll take over your debt, and then I'll just service the debt with cash flow from the business. And
there it is.
Yeah,
LBO.
Exactly. And this was 2014. And I had
how big was this business, or how small was this business?
It was, I want to say we reached about 150K in revenue. And here's the thing. Per year
or in total?
Per year. And here's the thing. If I had known then what I know now, I think I'd be retired because that SaaS business had so much potential. I just didn't know what I was doing.
What was it?
So it was inventory management, a company called InTracker. And we plugged into platforms like Square, and we would say, hey, here's an add-on to your point of sale system so you can track inventory. We had a lot of coffee shops who say, okay, I need to track my cups, lids, what are the beans that go into this, et cetera. And I think the platform itself was really solid. And I look at some of the inventory applications that are available today. I was like, this is not as good as what we had in 2014.
Really?
And they're charging a crazy amount. So we were charging users somewhere between $10 and $100 a month when we should have been much higher on the scale. And like I said, if I had more cloud background at that point, I think that I'd be retired.
You said you worked at Oracle, Chandra. Were you technical at all, or was that in a business capacity?
No, I was more on the sales consulting side. So I'd go into, a customer or a prospective customer, look at their business challenges and say, hey, here's how some of the software can solve these challenges. Yeah. It was perfect because I got to see a lot of the business challenges, present a solution, but had very little to do with implementation. So it's like, here's the solution. All right, good luck.
Set every sales guy ever.
Exactly.
I just make the sale and move on. It's everybody else's problem to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so from there, I just let InTracker chug along. It paid off its debt. It paid me well. And I looked at this and I thought, well, I don't really want to manage tickets. I'm just going to let this thing go. I think I sold the customer list for a few pennies here and there, and that was it.
And Chandra, it was making $150,000 a year with almost all of that was profit if you weren't reinvesting any of it or really.
Yeah, I was just.
And you wanted to let go of that?
Yeah, I was foolish.
Well, there wasn't also acquire.com at the time where there was an active marketplace, people who would have.
And I didn't know what I had.
Right.
I just thought it was like, you know what? I paid for a bunch of vacations. I had a great time. And I outperformed the S&P 500. This is easy. This is what I've got to do. I just have to buy businesses. And that was how the thought process got going.
And was it really like, okay, so if I can buy this little one-man SaaS business, I can probably buy a 10-person, traditional business? Was that kind of the...
Yeah, I
quickly
think,
connect those dots sort of thing?
I think so. And I kept it as open as possible. It was more just, I want to buy cash flow. I just want to buy, SDE at that time, right?
Yeah.
And that was the approach. And the other reason why I let it shut down is I started at a startup myself. So I started working on the consulting side at a startup, Coupa Software. It took a lot more of my time in the early days. And I was like, I don't want to balance both. I just started a relationship with my wife and I was like, I'm traveling a lot more. I think I should try to have some balance in my life.
Yeah.
So that was the other reason.
Yeah. Well, cognitive load.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like,
and there was some overlapping product functionality. And I was feeling a little bit guilty about, well, I've got this other thing on the side. Does something that Coupa is also trying to develop. Granted, it's a very small niche of inventory management. It just didn't feel right to do both at the same time.
And so what year is this now?
This was 2015.
Okay, 2015. And Coupa, I actually didn't know Coupa, but it was a screaming success and is a big company. Tell people what Coupa is who are ignorant like me.
Yeah, so Coupa is business spend management. So basically what Salesforce did for CRM, Coupa did for spend management. So think about your non-payroll dollars as a business. They would come in and say, hey, use this platform. Because of such high adoption rates, we're able to save just a ton of money. So customers were saving somewhere in that 6 to 9% of their spend because historically they were unmanaged dollars. Now they're going against contract, getting on a PO, etc. So it was the ROI for this product was really quick. And
this was a full startup. From scratch, VC style startup.
Yeah, I think when I joined, I was, not the super early stages, but in the 200 of employee count or under 200. And when I left, we were at 3,000.
Yeah.
So,
and it had gone public, right? So you were there for an IPO. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I left Oracle, went to Coupa, and a lot of my comp was just the shares, and I'm super lucky and thankful that that was the case.
So that was this was a story of working in a startup that goes public. You have equity. You do well. This is a meaningful financial event for you.
Yep. It was great. It was definitely great.
Okay. I may have skipped ahead a little bit because it's while you're at Coupa that Colin comes along. Catch us back up.
Oh, yeah. So Colin is my business partner. Colin and I have known each other for, since I'll say the 2007, 2008 timeframe. That's when we met. We actually met through Muay Thai. So both of us were training Muay Thai at the time. And I always like to say that the bonds of friendship are formed when you hit each other in the head a little bit. And so we have that solid friendship. We have the solid trust. And so we just started kicking things around of, hey, maybe we should invest in a startup. Maybe we should buy a small business together. And we've had these conversations going on for years. At that time, Colin was in a pretty successful family business. So they were doing low voltage work for hospital networks, things like that. So that family business was doing just under $30 million of revenue a year.
Wow.
And so it was pretty successful. And I think there were some family politics and things like that he wanted to step away from. So he and I got together and said, well, let's look for something on biz buy sell. Let's look for something that has really good return for, what we buy it for. And that's where we came across our first electrical contractor.
And so Colin's notion of buying a business, that was your influence because you had this kind of SaaS adventure. So you shared your enthusiasm with this wealth building approach with him. Yep. He was into it. He'd come from small business, kind of a big small business. Cool. Okay. All right. So you turn your attention to biz buy sell and find what?
This is a company, Gopher Electrical Construction, and based out of Minnesota. At the time, I was living in Chicago. Colin was based in Minnesota, and it just made sense for him to take over operations if we were able to close the deal. So we went through this process of, and I'm doing air quotes here for the people listening, due diligence, because we didn't do any due diligence. We didn't know. We looked at a QuickBooks file. And that was our due diligence. So, I kind of joke about stumbling forward, and this is one of the things we made a ton of mistakes in our acquisitions, but our job here today, Chandra, is to share with everybody all the mistakes you've made so that they can stumble a little less clumsily forward. Exactly. Because we didn't know about the community that exists today. We didn't have any of these other resources. We were just guessing.
Yeah. And what year are we in now?
So we completed that acquisition in January of 2018. So we go through this process. It's a small electrical contracting shop. It's got 8 employees. The seller said that he was really sick of dealing with HR, sick of dealing with people. He was one of the guys who just did everything himself and was kind of a grumpy person. He wanted to squeeze everything he could out of the business. It was just his life source. So he sold the business to us for $500,000. It, on the P&Ls, it was showing, pretty wide ranges across years, but on average, it was somewhere in that 350 of SDE. So we thought this is not going to be a bad return. We'll just do this all seller debt. So we came to the table with about $180,000 as a down payment, and the remaining was seller financing. And the terms, I believe, it was a 5-year term on 10-year AM.
Now that's a great deal.
Yeah, we thought so too.
So, but just to be clear, if in fact it was 350 SDE, we're going to hear how accurate that number was. But if it was averaging 350 SDE and you bought it for 500, you paid, what is that, one and a half times, and or less, and heavy seller financing.
Yeah.
So what is that? Yeah, basically 50% seller financing.
Yeah, it was great.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? So our first year, leading up to this, we thought it was going to be a screaming success. Our first year, we posted a loss of $300,000.
$300.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we learned is, one, this is different than the service businesses that a lot of people talk about. This was electrical construction, so this is hotel builds. It's new. Multifamily construction, things along those lines. So there's not only different points of the project that we've got to notice when we enter and buy the business, but also there's a heavy float. There is a lot of working capital that is required in this business because, our contracts might say net 30 days or net 60 days, but really it is, hey, when your contractor gets paid, wait 10 days, then you get paid. So you're doing the work for 30 days, you submit billing once, then from there, the contractor, the GC is going to submit for billing. once they get paid, which is usually 30 to 60 days later, then they'll pay you. So you're looking at really like net 90 is your payment term. So we were not only posting a loss because of where we took projects over, but also our working capital requirements were significantly higher than what we thought they were going to be.
And so what did you do wrong? What for the audience should,
Everything.
if they see a deal like this, how should they,
No,
did you basically need $300,000 in working capital just to be sitting in the bank account, or what? How would you approach it differently today?
So I think there are a couple of things. It's really easy to get stuck in the analysis phase, right? And just not make a decision. So both Colin and myself, we will just jump in heads first. We'll just say, you know what, we will figure it out. We'll just buy this and we're going to make some changes. Now that got us to where we are today, but we have the lumps to kind of show for it. So I would say I think we would still go in and buy this business. We'd still go in and try to do as much as we can, but we were given an education on, well, what is the difference in working capital from service work versus construction? What does it really mean for payment terms? And when you're looking at, is it your working capital, is it just your receivables minus your payables, or whatever calculation that you want to use? No, it's going to be a little bit more of a in-depth look at things. So today, I think we're at a foundation where we can go in and we can buy different businesses and not have so much strain on us from a working capital standpoint, just because we've got the other businesses chugging along. But I do think that oftentimes it is a topic we just say, hey, we've got this, we've got our analysis from the balance sheet and income statement, let's move on. I think it takes a little bit more care. So if it's the first one, pay a little bit more attention to it.
Well, I actually just Tuesday did a webinar on working capital with Sam Rosati. And so the whole thing was about this very topic. So I understand, that basically you guys kind of under diligenced the business and or air quotes, diligence the business. And where you really got burned was lack of working capital. And then today you just have much more working capital flowing through the entire Holdco. So you have a lot of buffer there. But what I'm curious is if you can distill into one or two tips what you did wrong specifically in that case. So if I found that business today on Biz Buy Sell and I don't have the benefit of a big Holdco or whatever, a Holdco behind me, what would how would I buy this? Basically $300,000 larger enterprise value so that there's that amount of working capital in the business?
Yeah, or it's working capital and also where the projects are that you're taking over. We made a foolish assumption that, a lot of these projects are basically linear. So, hey, you're doing the work, you're getting paid. The profit that you get in each stage of the in the process is going to be similar. Not correct at all, right? So, a lot of the profit for a project in electrical construction is done in the first 50%. It's called a rough-in. The part that actually is either a cost or you break even, maybe a smidge of profit, is the finishing side. We took over larger scale projects at that finishing side. So what we learned was we've got to really pay attention to the ongoing projects, where they are, what they build for. So in this game, you can also forward bill, which is what we learned about too. So the seller had forward billed, collected a lot of income from work that, as we were taking over, as we were learning about the business, doing work basically for free. So we came to learn that after the fact.
Chandra, this actually, for such a small business, the working capital problems that you were experiencing feels like it could have and should have been fatal. Really?
It was close. It was very
now
close.
You're still working at your W-2, so you don't need to take anything out of the business. Colin is operating the business, and are you expecting to pay Colin?
Yeah, so Colin was taking a nominal salary. I think he was taking something like $75K a year. I was also taking a small salary. I think I was taking $25K a year just to, for time, because we were always on the phone. We were kind of brainstorming things like that. But there were times when we were calling each other, like, are we going to be able to make payroll? Are we going to be able to do this? The concerns were very real. And because I'm putting myself back in that mindset, it seems years ago, but or very long time ago, because it was years ago. It was one of those fetal moments that you've talked about, right? We were really scared about it.
You were. So, okay. And I guess the fetal position moments are eased a little bit when you're working with a partner.
Yes. Sharing the stress load is huge. So what we had done is because I was still working at Coupa, like I said, the shares that I had were great, but it was still imaginary dollars. They were vesting, or the share price wasn't very high. I just got lucky in 2021, but the access to capital was still limited. So what we did is we went to lending club and took out some personal loans for working capital. And then we met a banker who said, well, why don't you take an express loan out for the SBA? And so instead of using $80,000 of working capital, we used $350,000 of working capital. And even then, as we were taking on bigger projects, trying to grow, we still had working capital constraints.
So you did need to then inject money or working capital into the business. You did it with an SBA express loan, $350,000.
Yep.
The $80,000 that you mentioned, that was what you were looking at from Lending Club?
Yeah, we did that initially. We thought that's all we're going to need. We're just going to need about $80,000. We were very wrong.
And then so you get 80 plus 350.
Yep.
And okay, so then what happens from there? I mean, did that do the trick, and how'd you claw out of it?
No, we were still on the downward slope. So I remember, I got married at the end of 2018, and we had eaten through a lot of that capital already, and we were still waiting for GCs to pay us. I think we had one that was over 120 days, and that was a big check that we were waiting for. We can't make payroll this week. So both of us liquidated what we could, threw some money in the business so we can make payroll for the next week. So this was September of 2018. The Friday that I'm going to fly out to Virginia to go get married, because that was where I was, where we were getting married. Deposited money into the account. Thought, well, I'll pay the wedding vendors a little bit late. Hopefully, we'll get paid back, and go from there. So it was, when I say it's held together by duct tape and shoestring, that's kind of what it was.
And when you say liquidated, you and Colin liquidated what? Your savings?
We had savings, any stock that we could sell. So I didn't have a ton of money at that time. It was, I think I threw in $25,000. He threw in an additional, I think it was $15,000. We're kind of worried that this thing was going to collapse.
Wow. And so you guys really you had some paper money, wealth from your Coupa stock. So you weren't really facing financial insolvency, personal financial insolvency. But every dollar you kind of had immediate access to, you put in at this point.
Correct.
And Colin as well.
Yep. Wow.
Okay. And having already done the $80,000 line of credit with Lending Club, and 350 SB. Okay. So, all right.
And
carry
then,
on.
I get married, come back, and open the mailbox, and there was a check there, and I think we breathed a sigh of relief. So we took the money we put in back, we paid down our SBA line a little bit, and then that's when we started to gain some traction and start moving forward. That's when the dollar started to come in. But yeah, it was definitely a scary time, to say the least. And I kind of gloss over it sometimes because, like I said, it feels so long ago. But talking about it now, it's, man, the anxiety that we felt was I'd say something we hadn't felt before, something I hadn't felt before.
Tell us what happened year 2. So once you kind of things start gaining a little bit of momentum.
So year
do they
2
improve rapidly or what?
Yes. So year 1 we had, like I said, a net loss of about $300,000. Year 2, starting new projects, carry things forward. I think we had a profit of just about $400,000. So we're net total in the black, which was fantastic. And as we closed out year 2, we thought, well, let's do this again. Let's buy another electrical contractor. We're getting momentum. So in January of 2020, we found Miller Electric, which was for sale, and we went through and we purchased Miller Electric, and we rebranded basically our Gopher Electric brand and everything under one Miller Electrical company.
Before we get into the Miller acquisition, let me just close out the uncomfortable chapter here.
Oh yeah. 2
questions. First, so you said you were net profit of $400,000 year 2. So did that mean you paid down you paid yourselves back and then paid down all of your lines of credit, or those lines of credit just, you are fluctuating to this day using
the latter.
kind of?
So we paid ourselves back, but I think when I talk about profit, I talk about it from an accrual standpoint.
Yeah.
But this is, I think in construction, it's just so heavy on, we call it the float, but so heavy on working capital that it takes a very long time to just operate on your profits.
So help me then understand when ostensibly the enterprise value is $500,000 when you bought this business, but given the working capital lines of credit infusions that you had to put in your own money, but then you paid yourselves back, what does that do to the actual enterprise value? Is it, I'm getting a little lost in the numbers. Was it still basically 500? You just needed to get some temporary debt to get you through, or was it? No, it's really more like it was an $800,000 acquisition.
I'd say we pumped a lot into that business. So I'd say our actual buy prices, you're right, probably closer to 880 when we think about total dollars that we committed either via debt or personal loans or what have you. So absolutely.
Okay. 880 kind of real enterprise value or acquisition price.
Yeah.
And that
enterprise value is probably a lot lower. It was just our right. Fantastic ability to buy high.
Right.
I think that's what they tell you to do, right? Just buy high.
Yeah. There you go. And then that SDE number, the 350 average SDE number, did that shake out to be about right? You had 400 year 2, you had negative 300 year 1. So my math is that's 50,000 SDE average of SDE a year.
Yeah. We always joke that, hey, mistakes were made. But I think that as we learn, and the theme I think of this is going to be, we are not good at due diligence. But I think the SDE numbers there was a lot of fluff.
Okay.
And we took it at face value.
Okay. Anything to say about the fact, the relationship between you and Colin? Not sure the relationship, but what I really mean is, it's always a very interesting topic to people about how there can be an operator in the business if the buyer is maybe not the operator. You guys are slightly different because Colin's your partner, so it's not like he's a hired operator.
Right.
But anything to talk about in that time that you're basically working full time and Colin's doing this, is in the business? Anything more to say about that? Those first 2 years on that point?
I think the benefit is that we have differing skill sets. So Colin, having had that experience in his family business, he had a lot more construction background than I did. I kind of joke that I don't know which end of the hammer to use. I was a software guy. Yeah. So he had the skill set. He kind of knew this area. And I kind of had a little bit of the finance side, a little bit more sales background. So it really was a good combination for both of us. And because we'd known each other for so long, there is an inherent trust along with, just the ability to share stress. I think if either one of us had gone in it alone, we either would have aged much worse than we did, or we wouldn't have been able to stand the pressure. So it was very helpful.
Great. And are you guys 50-50? Can you share what you are there? 50-50. Yes. Okay. And by the way, so is the plan at this point that that you, Chandra, are eventually going to come join at the time Gopher, or no?
Yes. So the long-term vision was that it would be both of us running these companies. It was just the initial start of, hey, this can support one person. It's a smaller acquisition. You first, right? Colin first, because he's got, like I said, the background.
Yeah.
He also wanted to exit the family business a little bit quicker. So it just made a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so then already you're thinking Holdco. Maybe you didn't use that word, but you are thinking that this is going to be something that you both devote your entire time to. You're not going to have other jobs, and you're going to buy more. You've already come to that conclusion early on, even though
it was more eventually
the first year. Right.
And I kind of think about it like, well, was there a strategy, or did we just stumble forward? I think that we were both really excited about working together, and we just didn't have an idea of when it would be that, hey, the businesses we acquire can support both of us. But that was part of the plan.
Okay. The other thing I want to call out, Chandra, as you said, kind of a theme here is, I think maybe you said the theme is that you guys don't do due diligence well, but it's the same theme. It's a related theme to you kind of dive in.
Yes.
And I'm reminded of my interview with Mike O'Cravy, who bought an epoxy like garage floor ceiling coating business,
right,
and a towing business, kind of in rapid succession, without doing exhaustive due diligence himself. And his point was like, my philosophy is I jump in head first. I just err on the side of action, and that serves me pretty well. But it also means that there's going to be costs along the way. I'm going to get burned more than somebody else doing this who's more careful. And that's just that cost benefit is one I'm willing to go with. Yep. I'm willing to get burned sometimes in the interest of moving much faster and not suffering analysis paralysis, which I thought was a pretty intriguing philosophy. It sounds like yours is exactly the same thing.
Absolutely. And I know as we go through this, we'll talk more about mistakes were made, right? Or the lumps that we took from jumping in head first. But it, like I said, it got us to where we are today. And there are so many reasons not to do a deal. You can come up with any number of them. No deal is perfect. So it's easy to get stuck in that, well, I don't want to take this risk. I don't want to expose myself to the potential downside. We just jump in head first.
Then you never buy anything. Right.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Tell us about acquisition number 2, Miller, which has become the namesake of the company. So this one,
it is our Berkshire Hathaway.
Right.
So the big red M.
Yeah, I see it. Nice.
So Miller Electric, I think, was just a fantastic acquisition in that it came with a lot more systems and infrastructure. So still doing electrical construction, but also had some service component. So we were able to steady some of the working capital requirements, which was fantastic. Payment terms of 5 days or less versus net 90. And we did get additional support staff who are with us today. So that was a fantastic acquisition. But like anything, we did make some mistakes. And one of the challenges, or one of the mistakes that we made, was we said, well, the seller from the first business. He was working for us. He was the master electrician. We thought, let's partner with him. Let's lock up that master electrician's license, and we'll all be 33% ownership, and we'll make him put the down payment or a portion of the down payment in for this Miller acquisition. And I will say
33%. So you were that. I mean, he was becoming a co-equal partner with you guys.
Yeah, mistakes were made, and I joke about it. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that brought up. But at the time, we were thinking, well, these master electricians licenses are somewhat difficult to have. Let's lock it up and make sure that we can focus on growth and keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. But I think vetting partners is just so hugely important, not only just from who they are, but if they're a cultural fit for how you want to manage the business.
Well, I would have thought, though, but at this point, he was a known entity. You'd already gone through a transaction with him, been on the other side of the negotiating table from him, then been on the same side of the table as he continued working for you in acquisition number one. So you'd think that you would have it kind of implicitly diligenced him.
You'd
by this point. Yeah. But there were surprises.
Yeah. I think that some of the things that we saw is, maybe quirks, just working with people. It's we put it off as, hey, he's just an old school construction guy. This is how they were made back then, right? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, these small little quirks were more character flaws than we realized at the time.
And are these flaws around integrity?
Yes. So okay. we came to find this out, years later. But
Chandra, actually, let me pause you on that because we're going to spend some time there. But just before we get there, can you tell us some numbers about the Miller acquisition? How big the business was, then what the acquisition looked like?
Yeah. So very similar to Gopher. So that was a $600,000 buy price. It was I think just under $300,000 in SDE. And then at that time we were looking at, there are some things that we wouldn't count as add backs, things like that. So I think we settled at 250 was the real SDE number. But what we really liked about the business was the structure and the support staff.
It seems like you're getting a good deal.
Yes.
Or at least and that was a good deal.
Yes.
Okay. And it was a good deal where the first one wasn't, because it was actually a much healthier, sturdier business without these horrible working capital constraints and concerns.
Sure. Yep. And there were still some working capital constraints, but not nearly what we faced in acquisition number one.
These are small businesses that you bought, both acquisition number 1 and 2, Chandra. So the first one, 3-ish SDE, this one 3-ish SDE, maybe 250 after you consider the add backs. So those are much smaller than the conventional wisdom would tell you to buy, and for the two of you. So the SDE numbers are kind of half if you kind of consider what you both need to take from the business.
Right.
What was your thinking about size there? It sounds like despite the fetal moments of Gopher, you chalked that up to working capital not being too small a business, because when you went back out, you bought a similarly sized business. So what were you thinking size-wise?
So our initial thought was, we've got Gopher kind of rolling. So we're not going to face that immediate or the as steep a J curve with this one, because we've got the Gopher receivables. We've got a lot of this base formed. So we thought we were not going to feel the same kind of pain with Miller as we felt with the first acquisition. And that was the thought process of, hey, we'll go after another small business. We see that it's got some really long-term employees. All of the employees at that time, with the exception of one, who were field staff, were journeymen, which at that time, and still to this day, journeymen are they're like unicorns. They're really hard to find.
What's a journeyman, Chandra?
So a journeyman electrician is somebody who's gone through the I think it's a 4-year apprenticeship. They can actually run electrical construction jobs. They can there's specific ratios that you have to have of journeymen to apprentices on a job site, things along those lines. So it's the experience and the ability to pass a pretty extensive state exam to be certified, to be a journeyman.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a difficult process. And I think the pass rate in Minnesota is actually lower than the bar.
So
like
you were saying, so you just saw a lot of, you were saying the value that you saw in Miller, despite the fact that the SDE number and overall revenue number was quite low.
Yes. And we thought, we've got a good sales funnel. What we can do is we can start to bring down the actual cost on jobs by pairing these journeymen with some experienced apprentices. So the apprentices are going to make a little bit less money, so we can start to average down the cost. We can ultimately make this slightly more profitable. That was at least the thought process.
So how does that go? So tell us a little bit about the transition and how it goes in year 1 and 2, and then of course return us to what happens with seller of business number 1, the Gopher seller.
Yeah. So the first few months as we brought in this new partner, things are going along. The transition is going all right, but within 6 or 7 months, we lost 3 key team members from Miller. So we lost 3 journeymen. And
how many had you had? How many employees had Miller had?
So we had 7 field staff, and then one office support.
Wow. So you lost 3, and those 7 were journeymen and apprentices.
Yeah, well, they were all journeymen. So that was the attractiveness of the business.
Oh, sorry, I missed that they were all journeymen. Okay, so you lose effectively half of them, 3 of the 7.
And it was that the person we brought on to be an equal partner, he was butting heads with a lot of the guys. Just like I said, from a cultural standpoint, he just wasn't there. If I can curse, I mean, I think nobody really wants to work for an asshole, right?
Yeah.
And especially in a trade where the demand is so high, to go somewhere else and be treated the right way, which is, what Colin and I really want to do. We want to build an organization that is culture first. We want people to really enjoy where they work. And this person was just kind of the antithesis to that.
Yeah.
And we saw that pop up more and more, which was disappointing.
Now that you basically have bought 2 businesses, 2 electrical contractors, you have you can compare and contrast them, including culturally.
Yep.
So he had been the founder, owner, and seller of business number 1, Gopher.
Right.
So did you then see that the culture at Gopher was not great, because as you looked at Miller and you saw his influence on Miller, it was kind of starting to bring the culture down?
Yeah. It was pretty clear, I think, that we wanted to take him away from any HR type of role or any type of management of team members. The problem is he also had the master electrician's license. So he had to go out on job sites. He had to interact with field staff. So it was hard to keep him siloed. What he was good at was the sales side, and he was good at, some administrative tasks, or at least that's what we thought.
Well, as you start to see cracks here, are you also concerned about the equity that you've given to him? He has not only operational power within the business, but he's on the cap table.
Yeah. So it was a concern. We were hoping that, and this is hope isn't a strategy, right? But we're hoping that we can bring him along and start to change his behavior or how he was interacting with team members, or at least silo him. We were not successful. Add on top of that, we completed that acquisition in January of 2020. In May of 2020, we completed 2 additional acquisitions, which were underground construction and fiber splicing. And those are the two businesses that I started running. So it was not only that he was interacting with the staff and we're getting more complaints, we're also overloaded with work from, hey, we've got to fully transition the electrical company. We've got to fully transition the underground construction and fiber splicing businesses as well. So it was a lot at the same time.
He's no longer at the business. So
Correct.
How did you extricate yourself from this?
So, Colin and I, we were looking at, hey, maybe we should buy businesses outside of this partnership. So we were looking at, a manufacturing company. And this is early 2022. And at the same time, he comes and says, look, I'd like a buyout. We thought, hey, the stars are aligning. This is fantastic. And we go through, we negotiate a buy price. We say, all right, there's a lot of debt on these businesses. We're gonna offer you, I think we offered him $650,000 is what we settled on to get his third of the businesses that we had acquired and just have him leave. That's, at the time we're thinking this is a great deal. We're getting a lot. But what we didn't know is all the things that he was doing in the background, stealing from the businesses, so on and so forth.
Okay. Well, I want to hear about that. But when you say you're getting a great deal, and you paid him $650,000 for 33% of the business. So you basically valued your businesses at this point at $2 million.
Yep. Equity value. Yep.
Equity value. And you thought that was a good deal for you.
Yes, because we
basically an undervalue.
It was, I think if we looked at what the growth rate was for, the companies that we had just bought, the underground construction company and the fiber splicing company, I think we purchased those well. And we had a lot of work in pipeline. I think if those were all taken into account, we'd say, yeah, there was a discount. But because he wanted to move fast, we also wanted to move fast. Thought this made a ton of sense.
And so sorry, the fiber laying business, the underground construction business, as you called it, acquisition 3, and then the fiber splicing business, acquisition 4. By the way, did they come as a pair together?
They were the same seller. They had different cap tables, and they were structured a little bit differently. But yeah, they were the same.
And we're going to get to those in just a sec. But you bought those as part of the partnership with the Gopher seller.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Mistakes were made.
So you had all this. So you really wanted to get him out before those things started taking off or whatever was going to happen there. So, but just to be clear, on the $650,000 that you paid him, you had given him the 33% of the business just in exchange for continuing on and having the master license. He hadn't had to buy in any equity.
So he put a portion of the down payment down to buy Miller Electric. So
that's right.
So the structure of that deal was, I think it was $600,000. We did that through, I think it was 20% down and then traditional bank debt. And then during that process of the Miller Electric acquisition, we also refinanced his seller note to say, okay, well, we'll just have the businesses pay the bank. So we didn't have a seller note with him anymore. He got paid out, which in retrospect was also foolish.
So he turned what into 650?
So we had paid him out all of the seller debt that we had from Gopher Electric at the close of the Miller acquisition, and also made him a 33% partner to lock up his electrical license. And he came to the table, I think, with $90,000. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, to add insult to injury, tell us what you then learned also about his misbegotten gains as he had been running things.
And I think I'll say this. So Colin and I are trusting to a fault, right?
I think
still.
Still? Okay.
I don't want to look at the world. Neither one of us wants to look at the world with so much cynicism and, so much doubt with people that we become the grumpy people or the folks that never trust anyone. I know I'm going to get burned. I know this is going to be a fact of life, but I choose to live life thinking that, hey, the people I interact with are going to be genuine. I know it's not true, but I'd rather make the assumption first and be proven wrong. So with this gentleman, he was doing was he was basically building things for himself and hiding those construction costs in project costs that Gopher and Miller were completing. So an example, he built himself a pool, and when he built himself a pool, there's cement costs, there's construction costs. Well, he hid that cement cost under a Miller Electric job that had cement cost, using the same vendor, right? Using the same POs. So when we're doing job costing, we're like, oh, this came in a lot higher, and then his explanation is, oh, well, we needed more cement, or we needed more of this. So,
wow,
he was just siphoning
right
money
to your
off.
face.
Yeah,
Embezzle. I mean, this is embezzlement, basically.
Yeah,
wow.
He built himself a barn. This is or a man cave or whatever it is, and everything from lumber. And this is, we started looking back at the transactions. This is when all building materials are super expensive, and just pulling funds out of the business, which was disappointing.
When I hear stories like this, I'm doubly aghast. I'm aghast at the moral failing of this individual, but I'm also aghast at their chutzpah to think that they're not going to get caught.
Yeah,
like this isn't a giant business where $50,000 here or there is a rounding error. Like these are these additional costs you immediately notice. Chandra, immediately notice, like, why is cement so much more expensive this time? Just and you're basically intimately partnered with him. It just blows my mind that he think he'd get away with it, basically.
Yeah. And I think the benefit here is that we didn't do $650,000 up front. We did do a large portion. So we did $450,000 financed by our bank, and then we did a seller note for $200,000. And we had that seller note kick in, I want to say 8 months later. So we had a standby period. And that standby period, when he was out of the business, allowed us to dig in and see what was actually going on here. And that's when we discovered this. So we held back the seller note, and we're not going to pay on that. But we're given this idea by our bank and our attorney. Say, look, you don't have to pay him after you found the fraud, because we're still finding fraud here and there. So it's
still now 2024,
end of 23. So as we closed out the 23 books, went back and had our accounting firm looking at 22 as part of as we're going through an acquisition process that didn't happen, that should have happened this week. But we found some additional transactions there as well.
Chandra, you had said on our pre-call how much this really bothers you. The emotions of being kind of robbed blind by your business partner, no less.
Right.
So this is a different type of unpleasant emotion than a fetal position where you're worried about making payroll. This is the emotion, the negative emotion that can happen in small business where there's just more theft that occurs, I think.
Right.
I think it's fair to say. I think John Wilson, who I recently had on the podcast, who has a plumbing business in the Akron, Ohio and Cleveland area, big one. We were talking about the path of buying a small business, and he says is one of the things that people considering this path should also consider is, like, are you prepared to be stolen from? Like, I'm stolen from every day. I know I didn't get him to elaborate on that. I don't know if he meant by customers or employees or what, but you just have the impression that there's that there's a lot more theft here than there would be in corporate America. So respond to all of that, please.
Yeah. So I would say that the first few months after we found the theft, I was really emotional about it. I was really, really upset. And, talking with our corporate attorney, talking with, we had to get a new corporate attorney because there were some conflicts of interest. So we couldn't use the same group. So we have another corporate counsel that we're using, and wanting to say, hey, let's go after him with everything. Let's use, we know that we also found out he cheats on his taxes. Like, all right, well, let's make the tips to the IRS. Let's, just a lot of anger, because there was just trust there, right? And when you trust somebody and they betray that trust, you're going to have a very significant emotional response. Yeah. And what I found is that emotional response was only a net negative to me. And it was, a negative to people around me. Nobody lives in a vacuum, right? As you kind of wear this stuff on your sleeve, other people see it. Other people know that, hey, this is something you're struggling with, but it also is in every interaction that you have. So I'm grumpy.
So this was permeating your mood.
Oh, absolutely.
This anger was following you around like a rainy cloud over your head everywhere for weeks and months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think I can compartmentalize, but I can't. And so, my wife would be like, hey, you're pretty grumpy all the time. What's going on? I was more frustrated with, even hanging out with my son, who was, a toddler, who's a toddler now. And, all of those things just make for a negative experience. So I had to reflect back and think, is hanging on to this worth it? Is it? And it's just not. So that was a little bit of the wisdom I came to.
Well, easier said than done, though, Chandra. I mean, I feel like I've heard that it's like, what is it? The anger or resentment. Like it's basically what you said. It's really the cost is to you, not the person who's the subject of your anger or resentment. So just kind of put down the burden. But like, the easier said than done. And I imagine, right. So I'm not sure the wisdom is so much that, which we all already know. The wisdom is how did you let it go?
I think you have to look at the impacts to people around you. And if I am making, an impact, that is to the negative on the people I love most, because I'm grumpy all the time, or because I'm carrying this additional anger for somebody who doesn't matter. They just don't matter in my life. Then, I've got to do the work internally to say, hey, let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Well, good for you, Chandra, for letting it go.
I still struggle with it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not fully Zen yet, but it's progress.
Well, I bet it's something of a muscle. You gotta kind of exercise that muscle to keep it strong,
right?
Keep the anger at bay, sort of thing. And also, good on you and your partner for kind of philosophically committing yourselves to not becoming losing, misanthropic, losing faith in all humanity, and just being distrustful in all directions. That you really have kind of a philosophical commitment to continuing to, give people the benefit of the doubt, trusting first, trust but verify. I assume you've probably gotten a little bit tighter around verification, but that you don't want to just become this jaded grump,
right?
Right.
Yep.
Sort of thing.
And that was not the last time we've been burned. And, even I think back to the most recent times we've been burned, I know it's not going to be the last. But like I said, you could either look at the world as, hey, a lot of people are out to get you. You've got to protect everything you have, and, go at it with that type of cynicism, or you cannot. And I choose to look at a much more positive view of the world.
Just before we close out this chapter of your story, just watching the time, but what do you think is the takeaway from this terrible experience with seller of business number one? Was it that you didn't verify, you should have been tighter there? Or I think we've already covered that maybe you were a little too generous in bringing him into the partnership. You offered him too much for too little, the master license, basically. What would you have done differently? What did you learn other than to put down your anger from this experience?
Well, I think I learned the value of a seller note. Initially when going through these acquisitions, I would say, well, the seller note just acts as, it's almost like equity for the bank. So we'll just keep a seller note on. So we had a seller note with our underground construction company. We had a seller note with the fiber splicing company, along with the Miller Electric acquisition. We had a small seller note there, which I just didn't really put much towards the phrase "have skin in the game." But seeing how this paid off, of having a holdback, of having that seller note to say, "Hey, look, you thought you were getting all this. You're not. You already got paid. Fine. We're going to separate," is a huge lesson. And
yeah,
we were able to use that tool in another scenario as well.
So the value of a seller note as not giving too much cash away, so that
Right.
if there's some uncomfortable position, it's not in, that money doesn't have to be clawed back. It's in your hands before being given over.
Right.
And you just don't give it over.
Right.
Great.
Trying
Great
to get back what you've already given is so much harder.
Looking at our time, and still got a few important things to get to. So you've done, as you said, a total of 5 acquisitions. We're not going to have time to do all of them.
Sure.
But I do want to hear about, I want to hear very briefly about all of them, actually. But we're not going to deep dive into all of them. But before we move away from your first 2, the electrical contractors, Gopher and Miller, which is now, again, the brand of the Holdco. Tell us a little bit about the electrical business. We hear a lot about HVAC. We hear a lot about plumbing. A lot of plumbing businesses offer HVAC and vice versa. Electrical is enormous, but it's somehow a little bit to the side from those 2 other giant trades. What can you educate people about this industry, business,
Sure.
what to look for?
So I would say this, it's a little bit different because we are so heavy in construction versus service work. So we are trying to pivot into a little bit more of electrical service, working with property management companies, working with, maybe HOAs, things along those lines, to where we get, a normal volume of calls to have an electrician go out and take a look at some simple problems. Maybe it's an outlet or what have you, or smaller jobs. That being said, I think this space, very similar to HVAC, very similar to plumbing, is going to get the same kind of attention in the next couple of years. But once again, with a focus on service rather than construction.
But any notion as to why it hasn't happened yet?
I think the licensing requirements, at least in the state of Minnesota, are really, really high. So to be a journeyman, to have that service work component, you have to send a journeyman out to do the work, right? So if I have an outlet out at my house and I've got to call electrical service company to do it, it's a journeyman coming out to fix it. And the cost for that journeyman, call it $125 an hour plus your travel time. I mean, the margins just aren't as high as with HVAC or plumbing, things along those lines. That's my guess. But
wait, sorry. So for you, the owner, the margins on your labor are lower, thinner, because they're so much more expensive, and you don't feel that you can pass on that cost to the consumer,
right?
To maintain margin, like say you wanted 20-25% margin, you don't feel like. Interesting.
And I mean, like I said, I think this is a new world for us as an organization too. So there are likely other electric service companies that have figured this out. So we're really dipping our toe into the water from these big, $2-3 million builds that last a year or 8 months to, hey, I've got my neighbor who's got a GFI, or somebody needs a new panel, something like that. So it's maybe just my experience versus industry as a whole.
By the way, I meant to mention this earlier. One of the reasons that we like service instead of construction, one of the I think the most commonly held reason that service is better than construction is because the revenue generation is smoother. It's not as cyclical. It's not as subject to economic trends. So construction surges when the economy is good. Construction gets hammered when the economy pulls back. So very cyclical. But also this working capital thing.
Yes.
I'm surprised it's taken this long for it to crystallize for me that the way construction jobs are paid is terrible. The terms are basically terrible. It's 60 and 90 days before you get paid for work. So we don't like that either. Mental note or note for the audience and myself. Great. Okay. Thank you for that. So let's quickly hear about the underground construction, fiber laying, and fiber splicing, this pair of businesses. What are these all about?
Yeah, so we bought this we closed May of 2020. So right as the world has shut down from COVID, we bought this underground construction company. We thought, well, we'll just continue to branch out from electrical. Our electrical service construction company essentially had some underground component. We thought, well, we'll go out and just buy this. And the multiple seemed fantastic. I think the total purchase price for both businesses was $2.1 million. And
on what? Give us a picture of revenue, SDE, employees, et cetera.
So revenue at the time was, let's say, $1.4 million. And for the underground construction side, about $200,000 to $300,000 for fiber splicing. And the SDE total for each was about $400,000.
So that's a 5x multiple.
But it was all asset based. So we ended up buying, I think it was about $1.8 million of equipment. So we looked at this and said, well, this is first, the seller was selling because they had recently had a heart attack and could not continue to operate the business. So they had 1 year where they were basically saying, all right, I'm going to operate this from my couch. Normally, they're out in the field doing every single thing. So the numbers had taken a little bit of a downturn. I think historically, they were looking at, close to $1 million of SDE. Granted, that's got a lot of fluff, but the year that we bought it, the previous year rather, right around that 400,000. So we were taking a risk seeing, well, the company is on a downward trajectory, but we think we could fix it.
And a lot of hard assets that came along, a lot.
Correct. So we saw the risk is fairly minimal because if this thing didn't work, and we were doing conventional debt with a 10% seller note, and some down payment from us, we thought, well, we could just sell all the equipment and take off the existing debt. And yeah, we'd be out our equity.
Great. And has that proven to be a pretty good thesis?
Yeah, I mean that business.
Well, the business is doing great,
right?
But just was your analysis pretty on point there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We're going to hear about how the business is done too, because that's been a lot of the growth of the overall Holdco has come from the laying, the underground construction, right? Yeah. So we'll get to that in just a sec. But conventional debt. So this is, I meant to ask earlier when I heard you say that. So it sounds like have you used SBA at all? No SBA.
Not outside of that initial express line.
Right.
And we ended up refinancing that to a conventional line after our acquisition of Miller Electric. So everything we have is conventional debt.
So what's the deal there? Why not SBA?
So we were looking at it from the terms, the kind of ease to operate. So when you're operating an asset-heavy business with the SBA, it can sometimes be a challenge. So looking at all of the things that you've got to go through from, hey, maybe I've got to sell a truck. Well, that means you've got to go get permission to sell the truck. Or you want to buy a new asset. You've got to go through the process of getting permission. And there are significantly more hoops to jump through to get the SBA loan. When I went through the process of doing conventional, it was still arduous. It was still a challenge, but I would liken the SBA process as more of a financial rectal exam than anything else. So,
okay.
Like anyone, I avoided it.
But what do you mean you have to get permission to buy another truck?
So the way our banker explained it to us is before we could buy additional assets or sell existing assets, we'd have to submit in writing our use case and get approval.
I haven't heard that.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe that was just one particular bank.
Okay.
But
so had you taken an SBA loan to buy a business, one of your businesses,
yep,
to buy or sell a significant, like a capital expenditure, you were going to have to get approval to do that.
Right. And these are things that I've learned somewhat recently. So we were looking at the SBA to complete an acquisition that was, that ultimately fell apart. It was supposed to close this week, but we were looking to utilize the SBA for this acquisition just as part of an expansion loan. But these were some of the terms that we were talking through. And thinking back, I'm like, man, I'm really happy we didn't do that for our initial acquisitions.
Yeah. I'll have to look around and see if that is indeed. Yeah.
It could be that these are requirements, maybe not from the SBA, but rather from the bank that we were looking at. Yep.
Yeah. So Chandra, you bought Miller, the electrical company, January 2020. 4 months later, you buy the fiber splicing and the fiber laying businesses, acquisitions 3 and 4.
Right.
So that's a busy year for you. This was 2020, COVID. Now, what is your participation in the businesses? Have you gone full time yet, you Chandra, or is it Colin doing the 100% him operationally at this point?
So it was at this time it was Colin and then the business partner that we'd brought in. They were managing the electrical side. I still had my W-2, but I had taken over management of the underground construction company and the fiber splicing business. So I would be driving to job sites, understanding the business, and then hopping back in the truck to do a consulting call for my corporate job. So it was a little bit of a challenge, just putting in a lot of time, a lot of effort to go through that. And I think it's not that I had to do it. There was a little bit of greed from my perspective. I still had shares that were vesting. And since, this was COVID era and I was in consulting, everything was a Zoom call. So I didn't have to hop on a flight to go anywhere. It just made it a lot easier to juggle both. Yeah. And if any of my colleagues from Coupa listen to this, I was still killing it. I was still focused on that job, but at the same time, learning and trying to better understand underground construction and fiber splicing.
And on the geography point, because Coupa, you've been in Chicago.
Yep.
These two businesses, underground construction, fiber splicing, are in Minnesota?
Yes. So I had moved back to Minnesota after I got married in the end of 2018.
Oh, at the end of 2018. So you've been working remotely for Coupa anyway?
Yeah.
Pre-COVID?
Yep. Pre-COVID, though, I was traveling a lot. I was living that.
You were back and forth from Chicago a lot.
I was living that consultant lifestyle of flying to a different city and having a couple of flights a week at the minimum.
Okay, and so give us a little bit about the business of underground construction and fiber splicing. What can we learn about these businesses? Are they attractive businesses for listeners to go look for?
I would think so. Just don't do it in the state of Minnesota because I'm really on the hunt for more. But so essentially what we're seeing is a massive investment from the federal level, from the state level, and the local level to increase broadband access for different communities. This business was focused on rural fiber development. We've gone to expand to building out full tier 2, tier 3 cities so that all of those residents have access to high-speed internet. So we're working with local and rural ISPs to build out their network. I'd like to say it was very strategic that we did this, but it was a lot of luck, because in 2020 these companies were still making these investments, and then in 2022, the infrastructure bill passed, and I think it was in 21 there was the American Rescue Bill. There were a number of different bills that were passed that just poured gasoline on this infrastructure build play. So we're seeing a lot of that flow through today.
Mm-hmm. And so this you bought again May 2020, underground construction. And by the way, the underground construction and the fiber splicing, I assume there's a lot of overlap there, that those two businesses feed each other. So should I talk about them collectively, or should I talk about them individually?
We could talk about them collectively. I'd say underground construction feeds the splicing side. So once the fiber is in the ground, we then send a technician who is, got that side of the contract to go in, splice the fiber together, test it, make sure light data can pass through, and then ultimately have the ability to have customers sign up and have that connectivity.
And the reason this isn't a single business and a single service where you dig and then lay the pipe and then have the technician come and make sure the data is passing through correctly, is because those are just two very different skill sets. Yeah. So digging and laying pipe is construction, as you keep referring to it, whereas fiber splicing is very kind of technical.
Yes.
Basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how they were structured when we acquired it, and we kept it kind of the same.
Okay.
And we see that in industry a lot as well, that usually they're separate entities. Usually not.
And the construction is so much bigger because it does non-fiber underground construction as well. Why wouldn't, or it's just more the job size is a lot.
It's the latter.
Ticket size basically is bigger.
It's the latter. And I was focused on building. I really focused energy on growing the underground construction side. Now I'm really focused on growing the splicing side as well to match. So it's kind of the prioritization.
Okay. Uh-huh. And so what does revenue look like for that pair of businesses today, almost 4 years later?
Sure. So this year we'll be just shy of $7 million in revenue on construction, and about $1.25 million for fiber splicing. The benefit here is that the EBITDA impact for fiber splicing is actually really huge. So we're going to see close to 40% EBITDA on that, $1.25 million.
Oh, fantastic. So a business that was doing, you said 1.3 plus, call it 250, so about $1.5 million when you bought it. These pair of businesses, $1.5 million, are now going to be doing north of $8 million.
Yep.
And the SDE, you said 40% on 1.25 is about $500,000. Plus, and then how are your margins on the underground construction?
The underground construction side is really good as well, especially because what we're doing is we're doing city builds that are really close to our headquarters. So we don't have to have the additional costs that other construction companies have to have, like hotel costs for team members, per diem, things along those lines, excessive fuel costs. So our margins are a little bit better right now, but I believe we're going to probably be just shy of $2 million of EBITDA on our underground construction side.
Wow. So collectively together, the pair is about $2.5 million,
Yep.
Earning about $2.5 million up from, call it 400 SDE. So that's 6x growth in 4 years. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really happy with that team. They've done an absolutely fantastic job.
And this build out. So in the 49 states that are not Minnesota, you think that similar projects are happening and
Yes.
similar kind of infrastructure dollars are flowing.
Yes.
But you had said that the businesses was focused on rural build out, but then you now just said that in fact you're doing a lot of municipal projects. Oh, I guess you said it was rural, but also second and third tier cities as well.
Yep.
So okay.
Yep. Initially, when we bought the business, they were focused primarily just on the rural side. We've taken it and had not just the rural side, but expanded into more full city builds, which has slightly different components. We have to have our team members trained a little bit more because they're interacting with homeowners a lot more. So if you've got a team out in the rural areas and they're putting in a ton of fiber, but they're along, just a highway or a county road and there's farmland to the other side, they're really not interacting with a ton of folks. But on the city side, there's just an up level or an upskill in terms of professionalism, in terms of appearance, things along those lines to give homeowners a little bit more comfort.
Okay. And so you're still working at Coupa?
I am not.
Okay. So when did you go full time?
So I left in May of 2021. So my first son was born in March of 2021. And, I thought, I'll just carry on as much as I can. And I found myself, while doing both, missing out on some of the important things for his development, for him, just, the enjoyable parts about being a dad for the first time. So I decided to leave Coupa and focus on this full time and just be more present with my family.
Good for you. And has your family felt the benefits of that?
I'd like to think so. I hope they'd say the same.
Mm-hmm.
My now 3-year-old is very rambunctious, and I've got a 7-month-old now as well. So if we do a follow-up call in a few months or a year or so, you'll look at me and tell me I've aged like a wartime president.
Coming out with a lot more gray than you went in. We're going to have to wrap up here, Chandra.
Sure.
But there was another acquisition. Why don't you just give us a couple minutes on that?
Sure.
Because you acquired and then divested yourself of it. But give us the very abbreviated version of that, just so we can get a sense of what it looks like when a Holdco buys a business that it ultimately decides it doesn't actually want to devote itself to.
Yeah. So we were thinking that we were this mini private equity firm, and we could utilize the resources of the existing businesses to buy and diversify into other areas. And so we bought a manufacturing company. This manufacturing company was one that manufactured trailers, equipment trailers. And because we're in the construction space, because we saw there was a shortage of these, we thought, hey, this makes a ton of sense. We found one that was about 2 hours away, the location, from our existing businesses. So it was a separate location. The purchase price was $1.85 million, included $1 million of real estate, $850,000 was the operating entity. We did this mostly with a conventional loan and a seller note. I think we put down 10% equity from ourselves. And I believe the total seller note was about $250,000. So we were operating this business for a total of 18 months. We were really sold on this because the owner said, hey, I've had a lot of success with this business in a very short amount of time. I have lung cancer. I'm dying. I want to spend more time with my family. And being the bleeding hearts that we are, we thought, well, this is a good business. Yeah, this guy's a micromanager. He's kind of a jerk to work for, but we could fix it. It's our own hubris. Well, we could fix anything. And So he bought this business, came to find out that the numbers that he provided were not correct, because we sped through this in terms of due diligence. We thought this guy was dying in very short order. So we come to find out that all the financials were incorrect. He was looking at showing deposits as actual recognized revenue. So there were no costs against this. This is a business showing 30% EBITDA, which we thought was, hey, this is great. We still have enough room to put in a manager and we'll be fine. So the business immediately is losing a ton of money. We're spending parts of our time there while still spending time at our construction business, which is doing well. And because this is the same time where we bought out our existing partner, there are some things that he did on that side that were presenting some challenges with the electrical business. So it seemed like there were just a lot of things going on at the same time. And the way we put it is we basically completed 2 acquisitions at the same time, both of which were a little bit on fire. So we spent a lot of time fixing the manufacturing company. So we cleaned up the real estate, made sure this was basically a healthy place to work. And we came to the conclusion of, look, we have so much growth opportunity on the construction side. We have these huge city build contracts coming up on the underground construction side, on the fiber side, getting electrical back on its feet. It just does not make sense to try and continue to manage something that is $200,000 to $300,000 of SDE. We fixed it. The real estate appreciated. We sold that business in September of 23. And because we had a seller note, we renegotiated that seller note down because of some of the fraud that seller had, and ultimately saved about $150,000 on that seller note.
And so there was fraud, financial fraud, and he'd never had cancer to begin with?
Correct. He did not have cancer.
Wow.
Yeah.
What bad luck you have with sellers. Although, Chandra, I'm also just wondering if your aforementioned philosophy of just diving in and knowing that you'll get burned sometimes is maybe a little too loose.
Yeah. No, I do think that in this world of ETA, you're going to get kicked in the teeth. Yes, I could have. I think we could have done a better job avoiding some of those kicks, but I still don't want to approach the world with that level of cynicism. If somebody says, "Hey, look, I've got hardship," if it's a team member or an employee, I've got a lot of hardship coming up. Can you help me? The answer from us as an ownership team, as an executive team, is almost always going to be yes. We will help you. Yeah. That's just who we are. Yeah. And are we going to get burned? Yes. I think I had a team member from that manufacturing company. He approached us. He was very upset. His truck had been repossessed. Can you help me? I don't know what to do. So yeah, we paid to get his truck out of the tow yard and all these things. He said, "Yes, I'm going to pay you back. I promise." I don't think we've seen a dime of that yet. I think that was $3,500. But it's just something that we're going to continue to do because I think that's just who we are. But yeah, don't buy businesses from guys who fake cancer. That's a good lesson. Yeah. And also have a really good seller note.
Right. Okay, Chandra. So ultimately, you sold that business. It sounds like mostly kind of as a capital allocation decision, or an energy and attention allocation decision.
Yeah, energy decision is probably the best way to phrase it.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so when you and I talked in January, you were looking at this 6th acquisition that was really going to be a needle mover. You've already teased that unhappily last week it fell apart.
Yep.
I hate to roll around in your pain here, Chandra, but broken deals is such a part of this world.
Yes.
It may benefit the audience to hear from somebody who is very fresh in a very disappointing dealing with a very disappointing broken deal. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us?
So this business was another underground construction company doing the same work that we do today. So putting fiber in the ground, there was zero customer overlap. They were larger in terms of revenue, in terms of assets, but their EBITDA was a lot lower because of how they bid projects. So we thought there was an immediate opportunity to have some gain, just because they were working with customers who would pay the lowest but had very little admin burden. They just made billing easy. Well, we have a team member that could just take on billing. That'll be great. So we'd been working on this for the last 6 months. Because of how the last acquisitions have gone, we were a little bit more thorough. And this would have been our largest acquisition to date, just in terms of revenue. The company was doing about $10 million of revenue. They also shared our same accounting partner. So we use BWK up here in Minnesota, so a very reputable accounting firm. And we were going through all the right steps, used a deal attorney that's known to get deals done more than anything else. And getting closer to the finish line, the weather is starting to improve here in Minnesota. I think that the greed glands turned on, and they thought what a lot of blue collar owners think, which is, well, I could just work more. I could just continue to work. And so they called the deal off about a week and a half before the close, which was disappointing.
And so to be clear, your sense is they called the deal off simply because, hey, I'd rather just keep this business because they're starting to see money come in because it's high season's about to hit.
Yes.
And what did you say? Their greed glands turned on? I've not heard that one.
Yeah. And, So
do you think, is this the sort of thing where it'll circle back around? If you hang around the hoop, this deal will come back to you in the winter when their greed glands are deactivated again?
I think so. I have no doubt that because they really wanted to close in December. And for us, it doesn't really make sense to buy a seasonal business in December and carry 3 months of, there's some support staff still on. There is equipment maintenance that needs to be done, etc. For us, the perfect time to close is April, May, when things are really going. For them, it's 12/31, and they kept pushing for that. I have no doubt they'll come back to us in October and say, "Hey, do you want to keep going on this deal?" We'll see if I'm still as emotional as I am today, because my response today probably is a flat out no, but I know that I'm still emotional about it.
Chandra, put down your anger, man.
I'll try.
Yeah.
It's words to live by.
Well, we're rooting for you. That would be a big needle mover in the business. And so, by the way, it's been a minute since we talked about the electrical businesses. How are they doing now? 5 and 4 and 6 years later, respectively, I think, of the two. Yeah,
they're doing well. I think this year we're slotted to see a little bit of growth again because of what the other owner had done. It took a little bit to get it right, back on the right path. So what is this? Almost 2 years later, it's now on the right path. We're going to start seeing growth again. So that part is doing well. I'm happy where we are there.
I guess let's close out with just big picture here. First, I'll ask, what is your plan for the next, call it 10 years? What has the vision evolved or become more maybe concrete about a number goal or some other kind of quantifiable goal? How do you guys think about that these days?
Yeah, so we're actually going through an EOS implementation, and we just had to kind of do a deep dive and answer some of these questions. But I would say our BHAG, our audacious goal is $100 million in revenue. It's 9 times where we are today, which is a big goal, right? So that goal is going to be accomplished by both acquisition as well as growth internally or organically. And do you think it'll come from rolling up, or is the strategy now to roll up underground construction, or is it
to look at that plus adjacent things to that, further build out Miller Electric with other electrical contractors, or what?
Yeah. So the strategy for acquisition is both. It's looking at fiber splicing companies because the margin is so good. Same thing with underground construction, just because we have a good path for growth in those businesses and we understand them really well. And then if we can find an electric service company for sale, then we'd want to go after that. So those are the three areas where we really want to try and acquire, not necessarily electrical construction.
Fantastic. And as you reflect back on what you've built, and maybe listening to people maybe talking now to people out there who kind of aspire to build what you built, anything that we haven't already talked about that you would advise them? We've talked about the importance of seller notes, about this spectrum of diligence and action, and where each person's kind of find their own place on that spectrum. Yours tends to be more toward action than diligence. So we've been hitting on a lot of these themes. Any other themes that you want to be communicating to folks?
I think sharing the stress load is a very big thing, very big component. So whether it's a partner or if you have an operations manager or even, just people around you who will help you share that load is going to be really important. I had Colin, we're now basically neighbors. So we talk every day, whether it's at the office, the drive to the office, the drive home from the office, things along those lines. So just having additional support to deal with the stress that comes along with business ownership is huge.
Yeah. Great point to end on, Chandra. If people want to reach out, what is your preferred method?
Yeah. So shoot me an email, chandra@millermn.com, or send me a message on LinkedIn. I've got a number of folks that I try to help out and share the lessons that I've painfully had to learn, and just taken some advisory roles with other groups in the ETA space.
Oh, great. Okay. Also, I've been calling you Chandra this whole time, and you just called yourself Chandra.
Yeah. Either way, I go by both. And also, I've got a little bit of a cold, so hopefully listeners aren't too annoyed with my nasally voice.
All right, Chandra, great story. Congratulations on what you and Colin have built, and we'll look forward to hearing an update from you in the years ahead.
Well, cheers, my friend. Thank you for everything you do.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.